Thank you so much, Wendy, for reminding us that in our response, there are two levels. One is the personal level, and the other, the macroeconomic level. And thanks for reminding us again to remember how blessed we are, and for giving us a compass for our personal response. Yes, a compass. How do we know that our partnership with the poor is guided by a moral compass? What are the principles that we should abide by? Brother Matthew Tan has spent several months working on Caritas Singapore's approach to partnering the poor. We invite Brother Matthew to share with us the approach adopted by Caritas. Brother Matthew, please.
How does Caritas Singapore and the affiliated Catholic charities go about partnering the poor? This paper was written with Caritas and the affiliates in mind. So it is framed in that way, yet it is just as applicable to any organization or any one of us that's talking about reaching out and helping a person in need. This morning we heard quite a bit about our faith, our relationship with God, and the social dimension of our faith, that it has to be put into practice. We talk about loving God. We talk about loving our neighbors. And this reminder is very important to us to go back and learn from Jesus how to live this two dimension. And this is what we talked about in last SMC about going out and partner the poor. And so we will look to scriptures. We will then look at the principles that we have formulated in Caritas and shared and brought up with our affiliates. And then we will look at some of these examples. In Jesus' response to the young man's question, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan. And this is the setting. The road between Jericho and Jerusalem, 15 miles straight line. But the road winds through a land that's barren and always the risk of being robbed. In St. Luke's Gospel, this is the text. We are very familiar that it's Jesus' answer to "Who is my neighbor? How do I love a fellow human being?" At another level, Jesus talks about how you go about doing that. So the call to respond to one in need can happen anytime. In this case, the man was just doing his usual thing, traveling along the street, traveling the road from Jericho to Jerusalem, possibly for trade, but was robbed. Then there was the Samaritan that came across, and he had compassion. This morning, Archbishop reminded us, it is only when a person who has suffered will understand what is compassion. So probably in this case, the Samaritan had been robbed before. And probably in this case, he knew what it was to be in that position. And that's probably why he carried bandages and alcohol. And he was able to then attend to the wounds, to respond to what is immediately needed by the person who is injured. And then, in his own experience, how to recover from there. So he saw the need for recovery. He also realized that it can be other people to be involved in helping in the recovery. And also the need for him to be responsible for the person, to see to it, a compassion that came from having been there himself. The Good Samaritan, in some way, gave us some of the elements that we talk about, that we will put into what is an attitude, a mindset when we talk about partnering the poor, not about giving, but about walking alongside. It talks about a need to have a heart of compassion, and then to respond to what is immediately needed. In this case, the Samaritan stopped the bleeding. And then it is talking about how do you empower the person on the road to recovery? How then to take a longer perspective of what is needed? Not a one-off, but what about journeying with? And so we have taken some of these, some of the inspirations, and formulated what we call the principles of practice. Foundational to this is the idea of our human dignity, the dignity of a human person made in the image of God. That is our Christian response. That is what Professor Irene mentioned. What is my faith response? In my relationship with God, I'm formed. I allow myself to be transformed with a heart of compassion like Jesus. And then I look at the human person who is from God and say he's God's unique creation. He's made to know and love God and to share in God's life. And then to recognize another unique quality that is in the unique human person, that he's been given qualities as a human person as resource, a way of becoming what God wants him to be, what God wants her to be. And so this becomes our first principle, that we should serve in a manner that upholds dignity. For us, as Caritas and Catholic Charities, we look at our services and see to it that all the processes involved are done and organized in a way that upholds that dignity. There was mention this morning about the need of how we look at these people. And so for us who serve in this capacity is to make sure that we are not patronizing or condescending to those we serve. We do not make them feel we are the rich giving to them, but we take the perspective that we are with them. What does our church teach us? That's the foundation, our human dignity. And that we are also our brother's keepers because God has entrusted us to each other. Our duty to love God, our duty to love our fellow man. And we will put this into our practices. We will treat the individual as a person, an individual as an end, never as a mean. When we help the person in need, it is a person put there by God for us to love. Not a digit, not something in our process. We look at the person first. We don't look at his problem. We don't look at another case to solve. We look at our brother. And we recognize that. And so we said that that dignity takes precedence. It holds first place, rather than our processes. Then the next principle we look at is that of choice and participation. This is a human person that we serve. and should be given the choice of the services that they receive and participate in the choice. I was just thinking at lunch, did we had a choice? How many? How many choices? 2, 3. Bento A, bento B, or don't eat. We always have a choice. And I think we love to have a choice because it makes us feel human. And so this is what we do when we serve the poor. We said, you have a choice. Let's present the person with a choice. Even the injured man in the story of the Good Samaritan had a choice. He could have rejected the helping hand of the Samaritan because he was of another race. But he accepted that. What is our foundation? God gives us free will. And with that free will, a choice, a freedom to choose the good, a responsibility for the choice. And as a human person, to participate in that decision that affects him. Our human free will gives us the right and the duty to choose for ourselves. So, the person in need can choose to be helped, how to be helped. And he and she is co-responsible for the process. And the family members too are part of him. They also are invited to participate, to make that choice. We will see that later on in some of the examples that I will share. Or rather, I will share with you the examples shared with me by our Catholic Charities. Those who are immersed in the water, immersed with the people they work with. And we talk about responsibility. We talk about personal responsibility, family responsibility. And so we said that those being served, their family members, caregivers, they should tap into their resources. They have the strength, and they take responsibility for the outcome of the services that they seek and they receive. Freedom comes with a right. Freedom comes with responsibility to determine one's destiny. God gives us that freedom to choose and shape ourselves. God also gave us our family. And so the family is involved in the helping process and should be responsible as well. The family is the root. For good or otherwise, the family determines a large part of where we can go. And so in this aspect of responsibility is the central part of partnering the poor. It's about a partnership. Something I learned from a Franciscan brother. Most of them up there. Talk about we are equal as partner with the person we help. We have equal responsibility, even if unequal in effort. A co-responsibility that it's not measured in 50-50, but could be 99-1. No matter how small the effort, it matters in this process. We recognize that there is strength in the person in difficulty. Let's look at this analogy. Suppose somebody in the village has fallen into a well, slightly injured. And then there are others who come to help. They throw him a rope. Now it requires the person at the bottom of the well to at least grab the rope, in some way anchor him to the rope, even if the rest of the effort is done by those on top to pull him up. There is, no matter what, a co-responsibility. A way where we work together, not 50-50%, but jointly responsible to progress out from the situation. In the fourth principle, we talk about a balance. A balance between a longer-term improvement, a shorter-term relief. That our services should respond to the immediate needs, as well as the longer-term improvement in the life of those we serve. The balance is so important. Again, if we go back to the story of the Good Samaritan, the first thing the Samaritan did was to stop the bleeding, put first aid, immediately stopped him from getting worse, and then start looking at the recovery part of it. Both are important, and you will see that in some of the examples later on. That's our foundation. A person is always a work in progress. We, all of us, are journeying towards God, towards the perfection that God has destined for us. And we also recognize that God has given within us the ability to change for the better. Our faith perspective, always a dependent on God for the graces, always responding to His call, always responding towards getting better. So in practice, in our helping the person in need, we take a long-term perspective from the start. At the same time, we respond to what's immediately needed. Stop the bleeding, stop the hunger, so that the person can start focusing on the longer term. That is a reminder. As an organization, as a Catholic charity, we know what's needed in the person, to check that and to know what is involved. More importantly, it is to empower the person to see beyond the situation he's in. Helped him to break up from the poverty cycle. Helped her see that that's not all that there is. Something you see in another of the example. Start where they are. Stop the hunger. And then the person can start looking into the future. Which brings us to the fifth principle of empowering rather than creating dependency. To ensure that what we do in our programs and services empowers them to take a responsibility. That's the human dignity. I can be responsible for myself. Maybe not yet. I need that little help to get over and break the cycle. And then also to bring the person, to integrate him into the society, to get out rather than to stay in the poverty. Empowerment then is helping the person to take responsibility for his own life. It is also to see and recognize that the person is wholly human when he's part of his society. No man is an island, seems to be a cliche. But it's so true. If we were left all alone on an island, I think we will all find it very difficult and eventually die. So we always need to be engaged. And so our programs, our work in Caritas, our work in the Catholic charities must empower. Empower the person to be free to respond, to become better, free to become more independent. Not dependency, not isolation, but integration. ACME, our brothers up there, they shared with me this story, one of the few stories. They've got many stories that you'll hear more when you go to the break-up tracks. They shared this story about Din Toy, the wife of a Singaporean man, and how having married in that country that he worked, moved into Singapore. in this new environment, in this new culture. She was lost, isolated, desolate, depressed. Coming across some information about ACME, she was able to get in touch with them. She was able to take responsibility. And in the counseling, they realized that the husband needed to be brought into the picture. So together with husband and wife and the help of ACME, they looked at some of the problem areas. They discussed, considered the options, what are the implications, and they made some choices. So Dean Toy took up a course of English for foreign spouse, where she made friends with the classmates. And then she also took up a course on beauty and wellness that allowed her to get a job. That helped to empower her. Charlene was here just now and Charlene shared some of the stories about the work that they do in the Philippines. And I call it stories of hope in Payatas. The infamous rubbish dump where in the mountains, that's where people live, where the poor live. She shared how the residents are engaged as a community, treated as team members, not mere beneficiaries, who shares in the mission, who gets involved in doing something for the community. And it empowers them to see role models beyond another recycling professional, to see that they can build up something, to create scholarships, to see what are the possibility of going to college, and then to get up from where they are. You are no more a recipient of help. You become part of the team. And that really builds up a lot on their self-worth. Ability to take personal responsibility, to participate in the process, to feel empowered. Let's move on to the sharing that came from Catholic Welfare Services. And they write about co-creating success stories. Now we moved back together to Waterloo Street, and they now have a CWS hub where the homeless can come to. We thought about a creative environment where the homeless has a place to come to, about facilitating a change in the mindset so that they can be empowered to change. Talking about meeting the immediate need. When the homeless was always focused on where to sleep, where to get the next meal, now they have a place to come to. A place where people know their name. A place where people care. Hey, we didn't see you for the last few days, where were we? It makes a difference. It breaks them from their first need so that they can start looking at something else. And the staff engage them, encourage them towards self-sufficiency. Now they have a place where they can clean up. Now they have a place where they can think about getting a job. Boys Town. I remembered when we were young, we were quite often told, if you are naughty, I send you to Boys Town. I don't know about the ladies here, whether you had similar opportunities like Girls' Home or Girls' Town. But I think there's some truth in it, you know. That's the starting point. But Boys' Town takes them in. And then they do something about it, you know. Give them a more conducive environment to be in, to grow up. But they give them education. They help them pick up some values. And this is what the perspective is. The staff shared with me. It's about not giving up the boys no matter what kind of trouble they get into. Never give up on them no matter what. No matter if they're lazy, if they're disciplined, if they messed up. It's just staying and staying with them. You will probably hear about the alternative schools where they try to stick with you no matter how much trouble they give to get sent out of class. They stick with you so that they study. That's what the perspective is. This is dignity. This is empowerment. Let me share then on what I picked up from Hope House. one of our newer Catholic charities, about empowerment, independence, self-worth, and the family. The staff shared with me, and I was writing this paper, they said, empowerment is very important. And that's why the boys are given jobs, assigned house jobs, and they are connected to have employment jobs with partnering businesses. Because they said the jobs make them feel and become independent, to break away from the dependency of the past. When the boys' lives were tossed around by whatever situation that affected them before, now they could have a job. They could have money to decide on things that can buy. They could feel that self-worth that was suppressed. And they said, self-worth is powerful. It changes the boy's life. And for those of us who are going to the breakout track, the team from Hope House can tell you a bit more how important the family is. They recognize that's the root. And they recognize that's where some help needs to get started. So as we look at those things that have been practiced, as we look at those principles that's tossed out, responding to the dignity of the person, looking at the responsibility, how about empowerment and all that? As our Pope tells us, go out there and do something. Think about it. What is your response? What can you do to respond? I believe in the last SMC, somebody quoted, go find your own Calcutta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Matthew. In the next segment, you will be able to find out how some organizations and Caritas affiliates have responded and applied these principles and the challenges they face. I'm sure you're looking forward to that, but let me make a few announcements that yes, soon you will be getting up and going to the breakout tracks. 4:30, there is you can have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the foyer, you know what I mean? It's a very simple tea. And at 5 o'clock, please be back here with us for the last segment. Now, your track is indicated by the color of your wristband. My advice is for those with green wristbands, maybe you'll come down by the first level because that's where your venue is. And why don't those with green wristbands please stand first, and please do come to the first level, and the ushers will bring you to your venues. And the rest, your patience and cooperation, please. So greens will go first.